divided on two sides of a coin. Okay, where you have people that either label themselves either conservative or people label themselves as liberal, and those two things can't coexist with one another. That's what you're being told. That's not possible. That they're two separate things and they don't mesh together. And I really like your synopsis, like the way that you kind of explained on how like that isn't 100% true. That there's a lot of similarities between the two of them that we don't realize.
Well, and I think another falsity there is that we've sort of been told that that's how everybody divides up, right? We've sort of been told that you have to kind of pick a side and that's where everyone fits. But, all the data shows that in real life, that's not really where most people are at. I mean, most people have, these cross-cutting ideas. Most people are have don't even know for sure what a liberal idea or a conservative idea is for sure. They may know some about the tribe, but it's like they don't even live that deep in the ideology and all that. But we kind of think we do because that's kind of how our brains work, and we like to be part of a tribe. So, but yeah, I mean, what we find in real life is most people fit these kind of cross-cutting ideas that, okay, well, I'm kind of like these things that I support over here would fall probably in that bucket, but these things over here fall in some other bucket or don't really align with that, right? But we're a little bit afraid to talk about that because if you're in your tribe and we're all talking about this thing, we all like this, let's do that, and then you throw out this thing like, yeah, but don't you think this is cool? And they're like, what? Like, no one says that. you know and now you're like, everyone's looking at you funny, like, what do you that's a weird thing that you have, right? But we find in real life that's actually most people, right? I mean, most people are not lockstep in agreement with one of these political parties or one of these tribes, and most of us real people aren't like that, right? But we kind of don't think so because we're kind of afraid to talk about those cross-cutting ideas that aren't necessarily what our usual group
Yeah.
assumes. And something we don't even know that's what the group thinks, right? We're like, oh, I didn't learn that one. I was supposed to think that way. Oh, sorry.
I told you this before where, being as somebody that's in the automotive industry, when, you have people that use clickbaity titles and things. I can give you a good example. People say the cars are still mass polluters. Okay. That is a myth that is from the 70s. Okay. And this is something that's coming from the automotive industry. Most cars today use highly advanced catalytic converters with O2 sensors that are like literally so fast, they moved quicker than you can even think. So the issue is not necessarily like cars being polluters. The issue then falls into a line where if that is where you want to put your focus on, I say, okay, why don't we focus on China and India, which are the biggest polluters? They pollute more than any other country in the world. So it's like trying to shovel a mountain with an itty bitty little shovel you buy at like Hobby Lobby, or Home Depot. Like,
Right.
right. It's not happening. Like you're not going to shovel that whole mountain clean with one little shovel.
Yeah, I mean, and you can kind of understand, like, India and China to some degree are like over here. Well, don't look, you guys had 50 years of 100 years of polluting like crazy, and no one stops you. So why shouldn't we get a chance? you know?
Let's take turns.
But yeah, I mean, it's like I'm sure they feel that way. Things like that sometimes. It's like, don't look. You guys got away with this forever. Now you're mad at us. But I mean, yeah, it's definitely different times. Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, for sure. Yeah, like you say, in the '70s, stuff like that, cars were a huge factor, and we've certainly done a lot. And like you say, they're so high tech now, and they all,
So high
you
tech.
could almost say that they put out less smog than they make, kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's like it's practically coming
Yeah.
out cleaner on the back end than it is on the front.
Yeah. And you know what? Again, a lot of that just comes into advancement in regards to human ideology. It wasn't necessarily a war. A lot of people complain about electronics with cars, and I do agree with a lot of people. But the benefit is it allows us to communicate better. Okay. You know what? Like as a technician, and I'm using this as a real life as an example, it allows me to go into your car. You're coming in, and let's just say, you're somebody that like has two kids and you need to get to work every single day. It allows me to go into your car and physically plug in a computer to see exactly if there's any faults or anything that's coming down there. I could literally go through wiring diagrams and see exactly what's causing the issue so that I'm not kind of second guessing. Like, let me get, like old cars are great, but the problem is you can't make exact diagnosis and repairs. You can't be able to use that input of like lasering in with those conversations and being like, hey, there's a problem here. Let's get into the deeper part of that. That's what electronics allow cars, especially when it comes to pollution and a lot of different things, being able to do. They have drawbacks. You know, if we think that everything is going to be utopia, everything is going to have drawbacks. No system is going to be perfect, right? I don't think I'm wrong
Right.
with this.
No, I mean, it's true. I mean, everything you do is some kind of a trade-off, right? I mean, you've got to trade something for something else. There's so many hours in the day. There's only so many resources. All these
Yeah,
things, right? Everything's some kind of a trade-off. There's very seldom is there something that, yeah, everything comes up smelling like a rose, right? Um, but
it's
yeah,
a
I mean,
great analogy. Mm.
yeah, I mean, and that's a good analogy about our politics too. It's like everything's kind of the same kind of thing, right? I mean, you're very seldom, and it's difficult because you're very seldom going to have everything be solve make everybody happy. Just like in life, it's hard to make everybody happy, right? I mean, and if you try, you're usually going to come. There's some old saying
Yeah.
about that, right? I try to make everybody happy, nobody's happy, and it's like it's way worse. And so it's like we have to get more used to that, like more accepting of that. And yeah, there's a lot of these things that you're going to have to take like the first version of it and say, well, it's not perfect, but let's hope we can fix some of those rough around the edges parts. And sometimes you have unintended consequences. There's all kind of stuff that can happen in a big system that was way more complicated than people think it is. I mean, we like simple solutions, but I mean, in real life, things are kind of complicated, and sometimes we don't there isn't necessarily a simple solution. Um, and you're going to probably get it wrong sometimes. Like we think we have it all figured out, then oh wait, there was this other thing we didn't realize was going on, and we didn't factor that in, and so we have to look at it again. So all these things can be a lot more complicated than people
It,
think.
very true. And you know what? One great thing that I especially as somebody like I love aviation. You know, I obviously like I have a very like electrical, I like technical things. But the thing that we realize with the aviation industry is, there's been like a lot of hate in regards to how things are being handled. If you actually speak to people that work in the FAA and people that work within these control towers and things, these my heart goes out to these people. Okay, first off, they're dealing with tech that even my grandmother is familiar with. Okay, like this is insane. All right, we live in a country right now, and I don't want to scare people, but the FAA and I forgot the other organization. There's a couple of other of them where they've been using the exact same equipment like 9/11 that we're using around 9/11. Same equipment. Guess what? They've been using that exact same equipment since the 1960s. So the issue doesn't come into of like lack of understanding. It comes into lack of awareness. Okay, you can't blame a presidency for this. You can't blame government for this. You got to blame a really poorly bad organization and business practices that have been going on for all of these years. Okay? Like this is uncalled for. This is extremely uncalled for. Like we have planes flying across this country every single day. And there are tons of control towers that don't even have proper GPS to communicate with the planes. So they only know when the planes are going back and forth if the pilot turns on the comm and they get that ping and they're able to put that into their log. This is 2025.
Right.
Right. This is not the 1980s. Like this is it feels like we're living in some time, I don't know, maybe the Matrix. This doesn't feel real. It doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot of technology like that, and even in government and outside government. I certainly know, like sometimes hospital tech blows me away with how basic it is, stuff like that. And
Dude,
that's
it's
it's like,
crazy.
yeah, and it is amazing the stuff that's in cars these days. So I don't know, it's if this rings a bell for you, but like when cars first started putting computers in, it was like the computers kind of talked all the time to remind you they were there and stuff like that. It was a door is open and stupid stuff like that, right? And everyone's like, I don't know, stupid car does talk to me. And now cars have like 15 computers. They have way more, but they don't have to talk to us at all because they're just doing things to make the whole overall experience better. But we don't have to. They're not like in our face reminding us there's a bunch of computers there all the time.
No. And the amazing thing also is that people don't understand that the way that these computers talk within a car, we call it a CAN network, CAN. And it's literally the internet. Your car has its own little built-in internet system where it talks to each other. And if you think about that, okay, that is probably the most amazing thing you can put in a car. Okay, you want to be one of those like, buy a Toyota, it's reliable. No, I'm one of those. It's like that type of stuff gives us some of the most incredible race cars available. We can build some of the most impeccable machines possible because of this. And like I'm one of those that's like, oh my God, that's what I care about. And that, like you said, paving a way of those computers that did the ping, ping, and that like simple little pin with the flashing light bullshit gave us this. Like we're able to do things, particularly if we're talking about the automotive industry, that did not even was not even a thought 100 years ago. A
No.
100 years ago, 100. That's not a long time ago. It's crazy.
Yeah, I am fascinated by old tech. Like, actually, I love looking at stuff that like I'm a tech guy, so I understand how all the tech stuff works. Like, oh, you hook a sensor to a CPU and you communicate, you do all these things. But
Yeah,
like these guys that figured some of that out, like in old mechanical ways, it just blows me away, man. Like we gotta
like
bimetal sensor here, all this
Mercedes
stuff.
EFI, like Mercedes electric fuel injection systems in the 1960s that was semi-mechanical and used hydraulic pressure. I'm like, what?
How did this all work, man? It's
How does it
amazing.
all work? It's crazy.
Yeah,
It's
I am
amazing.
fascinated by that, and I'm always, like, really impressed when they figuring out when they had to do it with some old school way of doing it, and they come up with a way, and those weird mechanical sensors and stuff that trigger a little it's all like Rube Goldberg kinda stuff that triggers a little flap here, which then it triggers a switch there, and it's, like, wild stuff.
It's so wild. I was talking to my grandmother about this the other day. I take care of her when I take her out in the afternoons, and we were dealing with a little bit of a refrigerator situation. And what's really interesting about HVAC, with cars in particular, is very early cars used air condition. Like the air conditioning system came directly out of refrigerators. Okay, like a great example, General Motors actually partnership. I think it was Frigidaire at the time. So you could actually look at some of these old 1950s like Cadillacs, and you'll open up the hood and you'll look at the AC compressor, which is like it's like this. Literally, same thing you see in your refrigerator. It's like this big,
Mhm.
and it have a sticker on there that says Frigidaire. And I was joking with her. I'm like, you could be one of those guys in the 1960s, and honey has, your wife has her station wagon, right? And her air conditioner goes out on the car, and you could be like, "Oh, it's okay, honey. We'll just won't have a refrigerator for like a week." But that it sounds silly to us today, but for somebody in the 1940s when this was being developed to think, hey, we're now making refrigerators, and we cars need an air conditioning system, and this kind of why don't we kind of combine these two together? That thought process seems like, oh, but that's a complex thought process. If you think about it in a more structured level, like refrigerator is stationary, car is constantly moving and affected by debris and life around you. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy.
Yeah, limited power, limited resources, limited
Yeah.
space, all this stuff, yeah.
And it's just like, it's just crazy to think that that idea ended up being one of the most amazing ideas. And it's one of many ideas. That is the thing. It's literally people being able to take the leap of faith, being able to try something different, be able to try something new. And that's where I feel like tying in with tying with everything that we've been talking about, it showcases on how human ingenuity plays a lot in the role of human intuition and human collaboration, where it's not just one person, it's many people. It's not just one idea, it's many ideas. It's not one thought process, it's multiple thought processes.
Yeah, I mean, most real things that get done that are that are significant, yeah, are all put together with some kind of a diverse group of different kind of brains involved. And and it can be challenging because you got to also avoid groupthink, right? Because probably some good ideas got thrown on the table somewhere along the way because a bunch of people said, "Yeah, well, we can't do that. We can't do that." I'm always concerned when people are saying, "Can't, we can't, we can never do this." I'm always worried about those absolutes, right? When people are throwing those absolutes out, it's like, wait a minute. Let's not start with that. Let's think about it some more before we say we can't do that kind of thing, right? So, but yeah, no, I mean, those good ideas are what is typically get evolved. I mean, yeah, there are those geniuses that sometimes they came up with the one wonderful thing and it was the best thing ever. But that's not really how the real world works most of the time.
No, no, not at all. I was thinking, I like German cars, and there was a period in the 1960s where GM tried making an air cooled engine, which was the Corsair. It was a flop. I mean, personally, for anybody who wants to collect them and restore them, I wish you the best of luck. It's a piece of shit, and it should be all, like I wouldn't even touch them with a grain of. That's just my personal opinion. I don't think they're worth saving. And the Germans came along and said, no, we know how to build air cooled engines, and we'll prove it to you. Porsche 911, one of the best selling Porsches for the past 70 years. So, again, that's a great example of like, no, it can't be done. It's not possible. Yeah, it is. It's the issue is like you're limiting your thought process. You're getting yourself in that closed box where you try something, right? This is the issue. You try something that doesn't work out. That doesn't mean failure. That means you got to try a different route and see how to be able to make it work.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I track. I have a Porsche that I track, but it's water cooled, not air cooled, so it doesn't count. To your point.
Uh, what kind of Porsche do you have?
It's a just a Cayman, like, I don't know, that's like the little mid-engine one. It's like a Boxster, except the Cayman has a hard top.
Okay, is it like a early 2000s, like late 90s, or more
No, mine's
modern?
newer than that. Mine's mid. Yeah, mine's the I think the 3rd generation of that car. So yeah,
Ooh,
it's a little bit newer.
okay. By the way, it's so odd because there really is no roadsters being made in the United States anymore. You have like Miata, but I mean, come on, it's a Miata. There used to be a time where like there was a lot of options besides from the German manufacturers, and I think especially like when you're okay. This is the thing about like nature and car. Okay, when you're in a car and you're able to race it and be on the track and you could feel the ground and you could feel the car like literally battling physics. You kind of are battling physics. Um,
Yeah.
having that ingenuity, like having that car that just does it right, and you feel that, especially when you're shifting, you're making those hard turns. There's like that thank you and that blessing of where there's an understanding. Okay, this may seem like bizarre, but it's so close to what comes to play. You don't always have to make everything exactly how it is. It's supposed to allow the person to be like, okay, I feel comfortable in this. I feel safe in this. Like, I know what this can do. Can't get that out of a Kia or a Hyundai, just saying.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that, man, Porsche does really has really figured that out. I mean, that car does exactly that, right? It gives you this confidence. It gives you this understanding of it. Like, you really do feel like you can
Amazing.
make it do whatever it'll do what you want it to
And
do in
and
a
when you're
controlled way.
shifting, that thing is just first done, second done, third, and it just moves with your hand. Like I people don't understand. Like we're so not used to having manuals. And like Porsches were really, really good at making manuals. I think also Mazda, also to be honest, made exceptional manuals. But being able to have that like feel to gesture to shift, don't get that out of a Ford. I promise you. I promise.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we talk about when we're, like tracking a car like that is, you talk about like rotation, right? Where
Yes.
how does it rotate? And, you know, and different cars behave different ways. And I'm telling you, man, with that Cayman, they make that it's so just amazing sense of control. Like, if I want to rotate it, I can, but it's like it's always in control. Like, if I don't want the back end to rotate around, it doesn't. But if I want it to, it does. It's just like it's amazing how much control they give you of that car.
It's so bizarre because we're talking about Porsche, right? And we have also Mercedes, BMW, and Audi. But to be honest, like I'm honestly like training to work with BMW. And I'm just doing it so I can have German electronics experience. But the other manufacturers, they kind of don't have the same reliability and dependentship that you get out of a Porsche. It's like when you buy a Porsche, like you know that you're building the highest quality German automotive vehicle available on the market. And that's what Porsche has been doing for years. You know why? They just keep on perfecting the same things. Like they realized in the 1990s that's kind of when that period happened. Like, okay, that's enough. Enough. We're just going to focus on 911's doing great. Okay, boom. They realized in the early 2000s, okay, we need to have an SUV. We don't know how to build an SUV. Okay, can we take a sports car and turn that into an SUV? Yep. Boom. Cayman was born. Not the Cayenne. Sorry, Cayenne.
Cayenne, yeah, the Cayenne.
Yeah, the Cayenne was born. But that's not closed-minded thinking. That's not being reserved. That's actually an open way of thinking. It's like, how can we be better? How can we take something that we're really good at and really proud of and make something better of it? Instead of being BMW, it's like, hey, can we make 3,000 vehicles with 1,200 modules? Yes, we can. We got 15 models like that.
Yeah. Oh, my both my wife and I are total car people. Her dad was like a car guy for his whole career. And so she was kind of like we both talk about we were sort of raised on motor oil, but,
It's in our
but y
blood.
but, like, for me, I'm actually kind of frustrated by I mean, there are some nice cars out there, but I'm kind of frustrated by the right now, kinda everybody makes the same 3 cars, you know what I mean? It's just like, there's so many the midsize, the large, the 3 SUVs, and that's pretty much what everybody's got one, and they really do there's a lot similar about those cars, and it's just like, that's the world people want, that's what sells, I get it, but, I mean, boy, I would like something more than just those 3 SUVs out there.
No, and it's really sad too because you have auto manufacturers that used to be really dependable at like making cool vehicles. A great example would be Toyota. Okay, there was a time where I mean, I'm really happy they made the Supra. Like
Yeah.
kudos to them. Like that is BMW ingenuity meets Japanese engineering. Like it's just but then the only other option you have the GT86, which it's just a rebadged Scion FRS. Like I don't care that they've came out with another generation. It's a Scion FRS. Where's the Celica? Where's the like where Toyota had the Spider? They had the Spider Mark II. Like they had really cool like roadsters and these fiery sports cars. But not everybody can afford a $54,000 car.
Right. Yeah.
So, and then you're giving people a GT86, which to be honest, like you're better off just getting a Corolla GT. I'm not like it's cool looking. You're just buying it for
Oh,
the body, but it's just a Corolla.
well, and even like the Civic, what's the hot rod Civic?
Type
But I
R?
mean, yeah, the Type R, but that's getting up there. They're like 40, 50 grand for a Civic Type R.
No, they're closer to $70,000 here in Florida,
Okay, all right. So yeah, and I mean, like
which is
who would think you're going to
crazy
pay 70 for
for a
a Honda
Civic.
Civic?
Yeah,
A
it's a
Honda
Honda
Civic.
Civic.
I mean, and they are fast. Don't get me wrong, they're
They
fast,
are.
but I mean, that's a lot of money for a Honda Civic.
I think also, people tend to forget we were talking about this earlier, especially with vintage cars, okay? When you look at the vintage car market, particularly from the 1970s, you look at cars like the Maverick, you look at the Plymouth Duster and Valiant. The Plymouth Valiant the Valiant, the ones that were like the base, okay? Ones that had like the purple with the white interiors, base engine, they sold for like $38,000. I saw a last one on Bring a Trailer, they sold for $32,000. Like the ones that were like the higher end, 15,
Hmm.
12. It's because like I think people like cool cars. But at the same time, like people like that. But the issue is now is that we don't have cool meets tech and fast and affordable pricing. Like I own a Mustang, but it's 14 years old. But like modern Mustangs are unaffordable. I think most people like in their 20s, unless you're like making pretty top dollar, Kind of hard to afford one. Camaro's gone. So what are your options? BMW M4? That's $48,000 right there.
Yeah, easy by the time you get it optioned. Yeah, I would say the Mustang is still closer to that category, but yeah, it's definitely on the edge. I mean, like
So
you say, but 10 years ago it was easier to get an affordable Mustang.
these days, yeah, I mean Mustangs are kind of selling around $27,000 and plus. And like, you know what? The craziest part is again, like I'm kind of turning the tables over to politics a little bit.
Oh, good. Okay.
People
Let's do it.
people love to blame policies and rules and regulations for the reason why cars are like they're the way they are today. Do you know why cars are the way that they are today here in the United States? It's solely because we spend most of the time importing. We don't, except maybe some factories and plants doing some minimal things. We don't really build cars here anymore. We really don't. And especially when it comes to even electronic components for cars, okay? We don't build the chips here. We don't build the modules here. We don't even build the freaking wiring for these cars, okay? We trust our enemies to build all this crap for us and don't understand why it takes weeks, delays, fees, shipping costs, and all of these things. And then what happens is manufacturers get lazy. They're like BMW, it's like, I don't want to use metal. I want to use plastic. It's cheaper. And they just start using plastic on everything. So you again, it's like the idea of thinking, okay? I know, and we both know this, is kind of understanding the car industry. It's anything to do with policy, rules, or presidency, or none of that crap. It has to do with the fact that a lot of the businesses, especially in the automotive industry, are lazy as shit and they refuse to build here because they come up with blatant excuses like, oh, it's too expensive. Oh, we can't make stuff like that over here. Oh, come on. Half the American racing industry is built in this country. Hearst, built here. Edelbrock, built here. What's their excuse?
Yeah, is Holly still built here?
Some of
Yeah.
it is. I think they do. They have some of their stuff that they've been exporting, but I think most of it's built. K&N is another example too. But I there needs to be more awareness of this. That's my honest thinking on this.
Well, and it kind of opens up a whole bunch of different things that I'm not necessarily an expert on, but you certainly have you could see that these corporations, a lot of times are looking at bottom line, right? And if they really can get it for a tenth the price, or maybe they could get it, maybe that playing field is evened out a little bit. But now that all that is in place now, all the supply chains are there and it's all set up, even if they could get it cheaper, it's like, well, I don't want to redo it now. We've already figured this all out. We have this all set up. We're just going to keep doing it the way we're doing it. But because certainly there was a time period there where, many of these foreign markets were offering some of these same things at like a tenth the price. So it's pretty hard for these CEOs not to do it, and you've got to, and I don't know all the answers to that. Like, but do you put in regulations with, I don't really like doing that, right? You put in regulations
No,
to somehow do price fixing and stuff like that.
no,
So I
no,
don't
no,
really
no.
want to, that route, that usually just keeps making things
That
worse.
creates price gouging too. By the way, like especially with
Yeah.
dealerships trying to counter offer and then raising prices in regards to the MSRP on the cars. You know, you're 100% right. I mean, you can't just keep on slapping rules and regulations to fix issues.
No. Right. I mean, yeah, you can't, because it usually sort of has all these second order effects you didn't really plan for. And now you get this, and so you can't suddenly, and so it's, we've done a lot of things, and I don't know I don't act, I've read about it, I know some about it, but I don't know everything about all the things that have happened over the last sort of 40 or 50 years to the way money has moved around, and you have this kind of middle America feeling like they've been left out, and they
I don't
have to
think
some
I don't
degree,
think
right?
anybody really knows, to be honest. I'm
Yeah.
serious. It's too much and too many lies and too many things like shoved under the rug. Like, how are you supposed to know?
Well, and it was something we were talking about earlier too that I think comes back to a lot of this, is that, we were talking about how we've sort of put a lot of our focus on these national issues, because there's a lot of reasons for that. And one of the biggest ones is, the way the media world has changed, right? The media landscape now is all consolidated. So, there's not as much local reporting, and so it's easier for them to only look at these national issues, and then the same national issues go out to all their affiliates, across the whole country, right? So we're all talking about something that happened in Washington today or whatever, and not all the things that maybe happened in our community and in our neighborhood, which
Or in our
whereas
local in our states. Yeah.
yeah, in our states, exactly. I mean, sort of ground up, where and so we're losing in two fronts. One is we don't have as much agency about what they do, and one vote for what happens in Washington. We have a representative democracy, so our way our republic works. So my vote only votes for somebody else who then votes for me later, right? So what I can do today about that thing is I can write letters, I can do all that stuff, but my agency is limited, right? I can only do so much to impact this thing they're talking about in Washington right now. And the other way around too, right? That thing they're talking about in Washington right now probably impacts my life less than all this news media is telling me it's going to, my real life. And so, like, meanwhile, there's probably a whole bunch of stuff happening at my local level, my state level, and all these other things that I probably should be paying more attention to on both sides of that coin, right? Because on the agency side, I have more impact of that. I can actually go to like a town council meeting and I can talk to the guy that's trying to prevent this idea. I still only have one vote or whatever, but I mean, I have more agency than I do. I can start a group where we go protest or talk about this thing or go before our local, I can have a lot more agency about these local things. And other things, there's a pothole. We can go fix it. We can also just do that. Like I put a weekend or group together and we go fix the potholes. I mean, there's lots of things you can do in the local level that I can't do it as much in Washington, and the other way around too. That thing that's happening in my town about the school district or about something else probably is going to affect my life a lot more than the stuff they're talking about in Washington. So that's a
Yeah,
big problem that we're
100%.
just putting so much energy in what's going on in Washington.
And to be honest, it's just a veil of, I hate saying this, it's a veil of dread. It's
Yeah,
a
for
veil
sure.
of misery, and constantly putting you in that just okay, on the positive note, like again, we were talking before, there has been a lot of efforts, especially with German manufacturers over American manufacturers, of trying to be help rebuild the automotive industry here. With BMW and all of their problems, they built a plant here. And those vehicles that are coming out of there are some of the most reliable BMWs you can buy right now, which is crazy. And it's because of awareness for those communities, okay? And the awareness of understanding of where there's a lot of communities in the United States that rely on those jobs. They're independent shops that rely on those customers day in, day out. And the local states are there to protect those people. Your local board in your counties are there to protect those people and their businesses. And what happens outside of there is just news. It's like seeing CNN when you're boarding on your plane in the airport.
Well, like you say, it's kind of the doom loop thing, right? I mean, the way they get you agitated is get you everything's existential, right? If this bill passes, life is over. This bill passes, world's going to end, kind of thing, right? And
I love it.
and
I love it.
you know, and obviously it doesn't happen, right? That's not what happens, right? And if there was one, it's the whole Chicken Little thing or whatever, right? It's like if there was one, we wouldn't know it at this point because you told me the last seven were going to end the world, and I don't even know what happened with them now. I can't even remember. It was like 2 years ago. I don't even know. Did something that thing pass? I don't even know. So you got to stop telling everybody that the world's going to end every time anything's going on somewhere. And this is happening in political campaigns. They're constantly saying this other guy that I'm running against is so terrible. If we let him do this thing, it's going to be the worst thing that ever happened to anybody. And it simplifies all these. So there's so much incentive for so many these different players to do this because it kind of simplifies their life. I don't, especially for a politician, right? I don't have to say very much about what I'm going to do. If you if you accidentally ever subscribe to any of those emails or text threads, it's like, they never say what they're going to do. They just tell you all day long what is going on somewhere else or what somebody else is doing and how I'm going to stop it somehow. Right. And it makes their
Ah,
job easier because then they're not really
it
accountable
does.
to anything,
No, of
and
course
all that
not.
stuff. So, you know, and it's not healthy for us because, it's, the world's going to end $75 is basically every political message anyone's ever seen.
Kind of a flip note on this is where, you take the adult entertainment industry, okay, which federally is a crime. It's illegal. But you have states like Nevada that has very open policies when it comes to this. Again, where it comes to state by state, county by county, community by community. You know, I've had the pleasure of talking to people that are within the industry, some of the people that have been in those areas. They're very respectful people. They know their industry. People are like, oh my God, they're trafficking children. Not all of them are trafficked. See what the media does? It like
Right.
paints this picture on something that, yes, we as human beings have this desire and stuff. Like, and there's definitely an industry there to cater to those things, which my personal opinion, I don't think there's anything wrong with that if done safely and securely and properly. But federally, it's illegal. But in those communities that this is how people thrive, this is how they make money, this is how they put bread on the table. They have that understanding within their community. So that is where you kind of have to ask yourself this. Do you want to put yourself in the world's problems, or do you want to put yourself in the problems that are actually affecting you on a day-to-day basis? Like the community you're living in. Like, is this an affordable place that I can buy a house? Does this community respect in regards to me going to doctors that won't abuse me and just feed off of big pharma and just push me with medications? Is this a community that I can raise my children freely, that they're not being forced agendas and opinions based on political beliefs? All of these things should be come into factor. Like, where are you living? Like, is that community aligning to who you want to be, who you want to raise your family to be?
Right, and if you're gonna pick those larger issues, sort of for the world, I think you kinda gotta pick your battles, right? You can't be involved in all of them. You can't be a
No,
champion for every single thing that's out there because
no.
you're there's not enough resources, we just be and that's why I think that's part of why people are so stressed out, right? They keep getting told all these things are happening, and they know they don't have that much agency to do much with them, and so we feel kinda helpless because all this stuff is kinda just happening around us, and it's all kinda doom all the time, right? So yeah, that's a challenge, and we talk about just trying to be more mindful of all that because there's so many people out there kind of they have incentives to do that to get you excited to sort of I don't know if you like the system one system two thinking kind of thing. Once you trigger your emotions, your sort of system two more thoughtful part of your brain kind of deactivates, and now you're just operating on emotion and fear. And they know that like this is not an accident. They know that's how that
No.
works. And so you know and that just so if you're more mindful about it, it can be a little bit easier if you kind of just remember that like if you're going to go watch TV or something a news program or going to go read just go in with a mindful attitude that they're probably going to try to rile me up, right? So just kind of keep that in mind, and then you can kind of when they do start riling you up, that can kind of be the trigger to say, maybe there's more to this story. I probably need to look into this a little bit more because usually there is. Almost always there is, right? Same with like you were talking about clickbait headlines and all that, right? I mean, clickbait headlines are 100% designed literally for the clickbait thing. I mean, they're generally created by algorithms these days, right? I mean, they do a bunch of A/B testing. They may have humans, trying writing up the versions of it, but they just do tons and tons of A/B testing, and they keep improving that headline until the one that gets the most clicks, keeps being there, right? And often by the time that happens, the headline has very little to do with the article at the end, and the poor guy that wrote the article many times is mad about it too because they didn't write the headline, right? Somebody else in the marketing department wrote the headline.
There, you touching on this, and I know this is a very touchy topic, but I just want to bring this up as just reference. Um, I was listening to a JRE episode with Dave Smith and Douglas Murray, whatever his name is, and they were touching on a topic which is kind of interesting, right? A lot of the times we start getting into these conversations about situations that are happening like in Israel, that are happening in Ukraine, or what's happening in Russia, or what's happening in India. But a lot of the times those people don't even have family or actually any connection with the place. Like, for example, for me, I actually have family that lives in Israel. Most of my family lives there. So it kind of pisses me off. It's like, hey, I have like I feel like I can be pissed off like about world issues, right? Because that's affect me. Like we were saying earlier, like how there are things that happen in government that, oh my God, like this bill is being passed, but it doesn't really affect me. But then when you start painting a picture about something that's actually affecting me, that's a whole different story. And then you start asking yourself, there are people that are quote unquote representing you, right? Like those politicians. But we didn't ask you to represent us. We didn't ask you to speak on our behalf. It's not even politicians. You have celebrities, you have comedians, you have journalists, you have news anchors. It's like no one asked you.
Right. Who gave you permission to to take over the public square, right?
Right. Again, as a libertarian, my thinking is always we're stay local because that's the most important. That's where you're spending most of your time. That's where you're working and spending most of your life. But when you have like things that are outside of your local community that's important to you, that affects you, either family or connection or anything that correlates you to that community, I don't know. I feel like maybe that is the human mindset. It's just we like to stick our fingers in places where we shouldn't. No pun intended.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
there's probably some truth to that. I've talked to, lots and lots of scientists about different things, social scientists, psychologists, political scientists. I don't remember that coming up, but now that you mention it, maybe that is part of our psychology. Because many of the things I talk about in my show are some of our kind of innate kind of behaviors, right? I mean, the
Yeah, I
confirmation
can see
bias, all these
this.
kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff and tribalness. But yeah, that's an interesting one. So yeah, we maybe that has to do with trying to find a purpose, sort of like I need to, my purpose is to sort of go help these people in this with this problem or kind of thing. I don't know. That's interesting to study the psychology behind that.
And one thing I kind of disagree with where you don't actually, people say like, oh, if you haven't visited a place or you haven't been there, you can't talk about it. You know,
Right.
I kind of disagree with that. Like, obviously, I have family here that hasn't been to Israel. So, but we still have family there. You know what I'm saying? Like that is the correlation. That's the connection that. But at the same, this is the crazy part. Like, but at the same time, it's like when you. e- Besides this, whenever you talk about even like mental health issues or you talk about a disorder or something, like you don't realize that there are other people that are actually being affected by this. And sometimes you don't realize that when you're talking about those things and you don't have that direct connect, that's what I'm going to call it, direct connection to it, it can come off as being cross. Make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess part of it is any talking about any sensitive topic can be hard, right?
Right.
And even everybody that's well intentioned, and many times people are well intentioned, and they're, often they're even reasonably informed, and it can still be really hard. It can still be really hard, right? And I think that's certainly one thing I learned in working in this space for a while now, is, you know the best intentioned people, even well informed, can still just completely, just the whole thing can just turn into a tornado. It can just be a mess, and not as much happens because it's just like you say, it's kind of the way humans are to a degree, and things can kind of unravel, and we don't realize we're doing it. I think that's one of the big things. There's this bunch of different phenomenon about this, but like, you can see this thing in other people, like when they're doing it, they're being toxic or they're throwing out some kind of language and this kind of thing, and then you start doing it right after that, and you don't even realize you just talked about the thing, and now you're doing it, but you just don't see it in yourself when you're doing it. It's
I
really
know.
it's really hard.
You know, I don't know if you've seen this meme. It's a news anchor from Uganda. It's from many many years ago, where he had this gay activist that came on to this television show, and he's like introducing introducing her, and then he turns over to her and he's like, "Why are you gay? So tell me, why are you gay?" And like that was, like no like sugarcoating, no like, hey, let's ease into this. Like, no, just straight in there. And I just, to me, honestly, like that just shows like the differences within people. Like when you go to different societies and different cultures, there's just a whole different thinking. I could
Oh,
tell you
yeah.
as I could tell you as a person, like I've dealt with Europeans, especially Scandinavians. Try being sarcastic with somebody from Germany. Try. Try. They're gonna get insulted really quickly. I promise you. Because in their culture it doesn't exist. They don't understand. Like, why are you insulting me? Like, I remember he's like, "Why you do this? Stop! Why you do this?" And you don't
Yeah.
realize because you get so ingrained in doing it so often that like you said, you don't realize how it's affecting other people.
Well, yeah, and you don't realize the framing that goes with it, right? I mean, we're
Mm-mm.
all there's all this that's happened around us, all this experience, all these inputs that have been going on for our whole lives, kind of framing everything we're doing, right? And the other person, if you go to this new space, hasn't had that same framing, right? So even within a micro level, that's sort of true, right? I mean, my neighbor has a different experience, this kind of thing. But then when you do it like that, like it's a whole culture and it's a whole world of different language, different words, different thinking of the world, it's different perspectives, different frames. So that now it's a whole different problem. Yeah, because you bring that stuff with you and you just don't know you're doing it.
I think the biggest issue is that most Americans haven't lived outside of the US. Like, I lived outside of the US for a few years, and I think this is the reason why I'm able to like be able to understand this to a certain level. America is very unique in the sense that there's no other place in the world that's like this. Like, I have a best friend of mine that lives in Britain. Okay, she lives in Manchester, right? And if you ever been to Manchester, yeah, it kind of reminds you of Chim Chimney from like Mary Poppins,
Right.
because they're a working class city. It's brick, gray, dull, underground, gritty, very artsy, fartsy. And like as an American, like you say, like, oh yeah, we have this too, but no, 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 you're not understanding this, all right? Like this is a society of people that has been working class since the city has been built. Like that's all they've ever been. Okay, like you don't have that here in this country at all. Like you have places that have like Atlanta, you have Memphis, you have Nashville, you have um New York, you have Chicago, you have Los Angeles, you have Las Vegas, like you have all of these places. Like we just don't understand the outside world. We just don't.
Yeah, and living there probably is even more, but at least spending time there, maybe a little bit longer than a 2-day vacation. Because 2-day vacation, you can get a pretty surface view of a
Yeah, yeah,
place, right?
totally, 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 totally. Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, it's definitely true. I mean, you travel the world, you definitely get a different. You see you see more of this, right? What is somebody said something about this? When you travel the world, you spend 3 weeks in London or wherever. You learn more about your hometown than you do about London in some ways, right?
you do. You really do. Because the thing is, British culture is very classism. It's built on classes. I lived in Israel for 3 years. And in Israel, I'll be very honest, like when you have two corrupt governments that are running a country, you realize a lot of the times you have civilians that suffer the same way that you have in Britain. Okay, for me to have my best friend living in Manchester where she's been dealing with a leg injury, and because of how the social care exists in Britain, she has to wait weeks, and then she has to find a doctor, and then she has to wait until she gets approval. And I mean, she had to have her ex-boyfriend take care of her for like 6 months. Like, yeah, obviously, like she's got like socialized medicine and things are cheaper, but look what she's got to deal with a fractured leg injury that instead of taking just a couple of months took like over a year. See what I mean?
Right. There's always two sides to these things, right? It's like we were
Yeah,
saying before, when you research these things, there's always more to it than your surface view of it.
there is. And it doesn't give you a preplex view. It kind of gives you an understanding as to kind of how the corruption and the existence of how we do things in the United States exists. Because a lot of the things that we do here in the States is based off of fear. Okay, the reason I again just based off of my like thinking and just the way I've kind of view things. Why do you think we don't have socialized care? It's because years ago they realized, okay, socialized care, we can't control it as much. So we should keep it privatized. They realize that you can't have government being on top of big pharma because then you can't get medications and things out. Okay. So you got to separate big pharma and then kind of incorporate it with government. So there's a logic. This is bananas. There's a logic behind the corruption. Like, there's a reason why these systems are set up because I think the outside view is like, okay, you see how that's working? Well, we can't really control that. So we can't really control that, then we can't use it.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly true that, sort of water flows downhill, right? I mean, oftentimes people think there's a massive conspiracy somewhere and Mr. Burns is
No,
sitting in a tower coming up with all
nope,
these things. Many
nope.
times it's just all these random things happen together. And, so, I mean, one of the journalist guys I had on says, the biggest conspiracy of all is no one knows what the heck is going on. you don't know, no one knows what they're doing.
No, and
That's
honestly,
kind of what happens, right? There's some end result.
seriously,
There's some end state that no one really drew out. Like that wasn't the end state anyone was trying to get to, but all these, different events along the way got you there. And that's why sometimes it's hard to unpeel that stuff because even figuring out what all those events that got you there were can be really hard to unpeel it to make it go away. Like, you look at the you know, it's one thing about we were talking about the socialized medicine in the UK is more complicated than you might think on first glance. It's
it
true
is.
of this pretty much every issue. I mean, that's the biggest thing that I've learned in this show is that I've been much more selective about taking some kind of a hot take on something, or even just getting really, I'm going to fight for this thing, and because I really understand it, or I really care about it. I've reduced that number of the things of like that a lot because many times you don't know as much as you think you know about it, and
No.
and you read a few headlines, you read a few wiki pages, and now you think you know something, and it's almost always way more complicated than that. So for me, it's like many times people ask me like about some issue, and I'm like, well, I'm not an expert on that. Like I think I kind of know it, but I bet I could be persuaded. I mean, I don't know for sure. I'm not going to like go, you know, dig in a line on that. So I'm very selective now about where will I really trench in on a thing, right? Because I just realize how much I don't know.
Yeah, and that's what I was touching on before. It's where if you localize what you care about, and again, this is kind of where this podcast kind of comes along, and I think the same thing with your podcast too. We're taking what is important to us, what matters in our lives, what gives us life, what feeds our soul, and we give that out to the world. For me, it's interviewing artists such as yourself, being able to create incredible things, whether it be a paintbrush or thought or even film or even making music or anything of those things. It's it's so powerful when you stop with the bullshit, and you realize what is important to you and what isn't important to you. And still, I think it's so important to have those connections, relationships with people that think completely different than you do.
Right.
You need that. I can't imagine just being surrounded by one type of people all the time. Like that's just it's like wasting your life. I don't know. That's just
Yeah,
boring.
and that's another thing that the idea of locally doing it if possible, right? I mean, if
Yeah,
you live in an area that's purple or whatever, that there's some people that have different views. It's much easier. I won't say easier isn't the right word, but you can be much more effective knowing real people. Like they're in your neighborhood and they have kids and they're like normal people. Like okay, they see political things differently, but at least you're starting off on some base. Like oh, we kind of live in the same neighborhood, so we share that. We share other things. We probably care about the roads. There's probably lots of stuff we care about, and we go hang out with them. Maybe we play golf or we play video games or whatever we do. So we know them as a regular person first, and then we can start talking about, well, why do you see this issue differently than me? I think it's much hard. What do they say? It's hard to hate up close, right? So, I mean, it's a lot easier to hate online from 3,000 miles away. But
it is.
so I do think if and it can be hard to have those relationships, but if you can have those kind of relationships in your life, you're right that it does it can really soften some of that. All the people that are think like this are wrong and they're idiots or they're evil. Worse, we actually believe they're evil, right? That they're trying to they're on some mission to take the world down or whatever, right?
And I think it also falls down to this idea that liberals are bad. Okay. I completely disagree. I think some of the most wonderful people are liberals. I think this idea of disdaining people and putting them down because of their beliefs, it's like there are wonderful conservatives and liberals. There's a wonderful mix of all sorts of people. It's, you got to get out of your mindset like man, just because you see a bunch of them protesting and acting like a bunch of idiots doesn't mean all of them are a bunch of idiots. You know, you
Right.
can't you
And
you
again, it
can't
kind of comes
clump
back to the news
everybody.
media is going to show us the most radical, the most outrageous stuff, right? I mean, that's what we think that's happening everywhere and everybody's like that. No, if there were 100 people in that crowd and two people were kind of acting up, well, who are they going to show you, right? They're not going to show you the other guys over there having a calm conversation. No one wants to
Mm,
see that.
no. No, because it doesn't it's not clickbaity enough. It doesn't pull enough media. You know what? I think what the internet has taught us more than anything else, and I think this is why we've kind of entered the age of podcasting and open conversations. People don't want to deal with the bullshit anymore. People are kind of fed up and tired. And I don't blame you. I mean, when you're spoon fed this lie, you know what took me to finally have the light switch to turn on was when I realized that the same things that were coming out of JFK's mouth in 1960s, the interviews that they had with people around my age in the 1960s, is exactly the same that we have now in 2025. Okay, minus civil rights and a few other things. It's exactly the same. So then you have to say to yourself, okay, that was over 60 years ago. So it doesn't, what am I
Yeah.
doing? Like, this doesn't matter. It really,
I'm
it's,
fast. I'm fascinated when I see that. Like I like you say, you see some video of something that happened in the '60s, and you're like, that conversation could have been yesterday,
yeah,
right?
literally was
It's
yesterday, only 60 years ago.
no, yeah, it's crazy when you see that. I know it does really it tries to put something in perspective. Yeah, it is wild. It's very true, and I'm sure I sometimes you go back even far in that, right? You see some of these debates that were happening like in Roman times or something. You're like, that conversation could have happened yesterday somewhere, right in America. It's like that's how long we've been having these kind of conversations.
And it's weird because almost there's some ideas, if I wanted to touch on this too. There's some ideas even from ancient times where we view it as profanity and an abomination, even though thousands of years ago was not considered. I kind of just like a little touch on this, which is so fascinating with the Romans, is that Romans didn't view whores as prostitutes. Like, they had their own palaces, they had their own servants, like they had their own like private villas and stuff. It's like that was 2,000 years ago. You have to ask yourself, okay, people are like, oh, well, it was different back then. I'm like, I'm starting to think that people have always been the same. It's just the difference is we got electricity and and tech and cities. Like, I mean, we're the same people.
No, we
We're
are. Yeah.
we are.
The brains have not really changed. We
No,
know this. Have not really changed for a couple 100,000 years.
no,
Um, and yeah, and I think what this is pointing to is one thing is that what does change are like the norms, right? You talked about something, in Roman times or some other ancient times, was not taboo then, and like it's taboo
no.
now,
It was
and
very
that's what
open.
changes all the time, and that's what I think we go through these cycles of norm changes, and it freaks people out. It's scary, like the world's going to be different after these norm changes, but you know. And of course, you don't really see it happening. You kind of wake up on the other side of it. But I think we're constantly kind of going through that. And sometimes it's a wave where there's kind of a lot of norms being threatened. Sometimes there's a wave where things kind of stay the same for 50 years or whatever, or ish, more the same for a few generations. And I think that's, we're going through that now just as much as anywhere else. There'll be some kind of equilibrium of new norms. Who know? I don't know what they're going to be. I'm not that smart. I can't predict it, but I think we're going through that. I think we're looking, and it's probably scary for a lot of us. Like, oh, what are these new norms going to look like? If you, like you say, if you sort of dropped off somebody from the '40s, dropped them off now, I mean, they'd think we're a bunch of apostates, and we're like we should all go to hell right away, right?
Yeah.
Um, But I think that's just but we just consider this is normal now. This is how what normal looks like. So I think we're going through a phase like that now where we're in the middle of these norms being updated, and I just don't we don't know where it's going to land, but it will find some new equilibrium, and then that's the world we'll deal with.
It's really strange because we kind of are causing that change to happen without even
Right.
realizing it. And as a person that's also interviewed people that are in the underground and indie scenes with filmmaking and music, it's no longer really underground anymore because we have the internet and they have access to things that they needed a middleman. They needed some type of promoter of some kind to be able to get things out. You don't really need that anymore. You just need this and a computer, a phone. Good.
Yeah.
Good to go.
Yeah, and the bar's lowering and lowering, right? I mean, like you said, you can pretty much do it all with a phone nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, if I wanted to, I could do this on a phone. But then again, you wouldn't be able to hear like the good, sweet sound.
Yeah, but it's getting there. I mean, it's the kind of thing that you could see that you could produce a pretty high quality thing with modern phone pretty soon. I think.
Well, there was I had somebody who was telling me this. There was an indie film that came out last year that was made with I believe, an iPhone or a Samsung product. They obviously use like high quality like lighting and stuff.
Right.
It's was just a regular, but the whole film was done just with the phone. And what was bananas was he was telling me that the budget actually was more than like
Oh,
projected.
really?
Yeah, it was more, but it was very high quality. It was very well made with a smartphone. I mean, you're right. Like we are at a stepping stone where I okay, I don't want to get like all heebie-jeebie, and stuff like that, but we are kind of moving to a new form of power and energy, which, believe it or not, that actually does shape a society. We're probably going to be moving more to a time where they're going to probably start doing more things in space. A lot more jobs are going to be compartmentalized. Like, for example, we are talking about the automotive industry. Um, we no longer, they're like, the mechanics are kind of dead. Like, it's now automotive technicians. And then what that's going to basically turn into is you're going to be an auto technician. So you'll be able to do diagnostics, repairs, pretty much everything that right now takes 4 or 5 people to do. A lot of things are going to start getting like that. So it's a matter of either being ahead of the curve or being behind. And it doesn't mean like, oh, you need to stuff yourself with all the media and crap. What it is that you gotta like realize, hey man, the reason why we have all this corruption and crap and all this chaos with government, they're stuck in the past. Guess what? I don't want to be stuck in the past. I want to be stuck in the future.
Well, and I think we're seeing that with the media landscape. You were sort of talking about the way the world works now is really changing, and you know, traditional media has always kind of controlled that. Like you said, you had to have a producer, you had to have this, you had to have that. You couldn't be allowed in without these seven things, and and that world is 100% changing, right? I mean, um, and there's good things about it and bad things about it, right? And that's freaking a lot of people out too, right? Because you've got the information landscape, you can bubble up, you can filter bubble yourself into a world where you're not getting very diverse opinions. But at the same time, there's also some of the best journalism happening anywhere is happening in some of these smaller circles and some of these smaller producers and creatives. And I don't know exactly what that looks like either. But I mean, I think ultimately that's where we're going. So if you want to stick your head in the sand and say I'm just going to keep doing the thing I used to do, you're those days are gone. Those days are numbered.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, like being in vocational school and being around a lot of my classmates, a lot of them don't care about electronics. And obviously, like, I'm a lot older than they are, but I keep on being that person, keep telling them like, hey, if you're not interested in doing that, guess what? You're in the wrong industry. You're not gonna have a future. I guarantee you're gonna get spit in and spit out quicker than quick. And people could be like, well, it's taking away jobs. It's it's evolving jobs. It's not taking away jobs. It's evolving jobs. It's making things more efficient. Okay? Making it where there's less margin of error, where we can maybe get to a place where instead of it, like we said, where you have to go through 6 or 7 people, it could take a year or 2 years to make things. Now you can do them in a lot quicker. It can allow us to be able to take care of things a lot sooner and a lot quicker than we were able to do before, especially local.
Y
Imagine a world where we switch away from this like worldwide social media to more of a local social media that focuses on your local communities. That could be our future, by the way. That is a reality that we don't think about.
Yeah. Oh, I think there's lots of potential things that can. I mean, we think social media's been around forever, right? It feels like it's like, oh, it's a set in stone. It's going to be like this
No,
forever.
it's
It's like
very new.
we're very on the beginnings of where all whatever we might call social media or whatever we have now we call social media. Whatever the landscape and the tools and the technology looks like, in the future is, I think, going to be massively different. It's got to be massively different. We know this way it isn't working that great. We need to do some things better, right? And I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of opportunity there. I was curious, just to kind of go off on a couple weird things, like in the auto tech
Yeah,
world.
sure.
So, like, well, and this kind of makes me think of, like, forever, my whole lifetime, pretty much, you've been told automation is going to take away jobs, and computers are going to take away jobs, and all these kind of things, right? And there was always going to be these un, unskilled workers, not the word for it, but kind of blue collar jobs are going to go away first. But it's kind of the other way around. Like, as AI builds, it's the white collar jobs that are going away first, or these mid level management jobs that are going away first, right? And that's the stuff that the software can actually do really pretty well. Like, you can kind of script it and get it to work. So, what's your take? Like, people always said it's the robots we got to worry about, right? But maybe it's the robots that are kind of the last thing, and it's going to be like, could you see a world where the human tech more or less sits at a menu and the computer just tells them what to do, which bolts to take off?
No, I see where humans are still going to have jobs, probably a lot more than we think. You know what? We were touching on the automotive industry. I'll tell you one thing that's amazing, right? Porsche. They have a program, it's a VR program for automotive technicians where they can put this thing on. And by the way, as somebody like leaks, leaks are, as we say, the devil's work because it's a lot of testing. Sometimes it's not around sensors. So you're not always getting like error codes or. But what Porsche has figured out is they've created this VR headset that uses AI and artificial intelligence where it turns the car into a skeleton. And you could zoom into the areas that could be the areas that are causing the leak, and you can see it in real time using augmented reality. Th- that is something that's incredible, and I'm kind of like more of a realist and a little bit more optimistic with this. What this means is that we're entering a future where machine and human intuition are going to become more intertwined, where we can become more sophisticated with these machines. Like, just imagine where that tech is going to be for the automotive industry in 10 years from now. Oh my God, it's going to be crazy.
Yeah, and you can see how fast all that's changed. Well, and that's another space where it's like, for all these first, what would we call it? What gen of that would we call it? Are we sort of in a third gen of that kind of stuff now?
We, it's Gen Beta. That's the current generation now. It's Gen Beta.
Yeah, I mean, because you think of those first headsets and stuff, and it was kind of garbage, and it was super cool. Like, oh, it's fun. I can play a game in it or whatever. But yeah, it's still just infinitesimal where it is and where it's going to go. It's the same way with all this, all the you think about these language models and the stuff they're already doing. We have to remember this is as bad as it's ever going to be.
It's going to get a lot better. I mean, we don't realize also like with a first of all, we don't have true AI. We have what's called it's a language-based programming network, which in plain simple English is a very very long program that is able to input and output outside of its parameters based on like whatever requirements are put in. It's very complex, but it's still code. It's just text, input, output. That's it. That's pretty much what it is. So it is very much in its infancy. Like what we considered like AGI, like the next generation of this, is autonomous. It's going to become autonomous. That's the only way for it to actually become beneficial. People are like, oh my God, it's going to take over the world. Do you understand how beneficial that is for it to become autonomous for an automotive technician? Again, because like this is kind of the industry I'm going into. I can be trying to diagnose a vehicle and I'm frustrated as heck. And I can be like, hey, Jarvis, I'm like struggling over here. Can you help me kind of figure this out? And I'll go through the network and kind of figure out along with me. So instead of having where technicians have to rely on other people constantly, you can have that second input that's working autonomously from you within that system. Like there are those benefits. Agree, there are those negatives, but there are those benefits, and I can kind of see where the future is going, even though like we can't really. Sorry, they can't really predict the future.
No, but yeah, yeah, but yeah, it's interesting. I was kind of yeah, I think that there's a lot going on there. I think with the I've had several folks from the AGI world on my show talking about where this might go or where it won't go, and and there's a lot of doomsayers and all that kind of stuff out there, right? And who knows, those scenarios could play out, I guess, but
It
I
could
don't think
be,
anybody knows, um, but yeah, I feel like the whole how automation is going to work in real life like is so it reminds me of like when you go back to some of here's these things from the 50s and say this is the future, what the future is going to look like, right? I mean, some of them are remarkably good, like they had just people using screens and doing basically Zoom calls, like they got a lot of stuff right, and then other stuff is just like it's
meet
so
George
wrong, like it
Jetson.
never went.
Do do
Yeah,
do do.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, the cartoons I think got it better than the
I
professionals,
love the Jetsons.
the
It's so
futurists.
classic. It's so fun. But I think
But I
if we're
think we're
talking
just
about, if we're talking about TV shows, I think one that got it really right was Star Trek. I'm gonna say that.
yeah, okay.
What do you
Well, that's
think?
a pretty optimistic view. I mean, if that's where things go. I mean, that's also though a pretty crunchy view, right? I mean, everyone gets along and we have diversity everywhere and everybody's happy about it. So, I mean, that's a pretty, that maybe we can get there.
But there still is corruption within the Federation. That is the
Right.
thing that I like about Star Trek is like they're not 100% kosher. They
Right.
still go invade other planets when these species don't want to be bothered. And it's like oh my god, like where our ship is getting attacked, it's like, yo, like they don't want to be bothered. Like leave them alone. And they just keep going. But what I think they got right was in regards to artificial intelligence. I think we're going to move more towards where we don't have phones in front of us. Like they're like, oh,
Right.
they didn't predict. They did kind of predict it. Where like this is a very early version of how this technology works to a point where you're not gonna need a screen to do a lot of the things your phone does. You'll be environments that'll be able to do all of those things like that.
Right. It's similar to what I was talking about with the cars when they first started putting computers in the cars. They had to really kind of let everybody know by making them talk and do weird stuff and beep all the time. And, like I say, and now the computers are just kind of there doing their thing and we don't know what's happening. And I think there's more of that going to happen, right? And that's already happening. Think about it, right? All the stuff you can probably look around your room right now and think how many CPUs are there and all these various devices. They're just kind of doing their thing on their own, right? I don't need to go tell them what to do all the time.
No, you don't have to at all. It's I was thinking about we were talking about with cars. You you talk about the early generations of computers, right? Fun fact, there was a car called the Cadillac Alante, which
Oh yeah.
its wiring and modules weighed more than the actual like engine in the car. That was kind of the early adoption, where that's what it took to power something like that. But we've moved so past that, and you're so right. Like we're very much in the early stages of this. Like even podcasting is really new. I mean, I I think like also kind of what we're doing is also very new. People are very used to being in the same room in regards to recording. Being able to do this virtually and still very much naturally is something that did not exist 8 years ago. Like try doing this on Skype in 2009, bro.
Right.
Good luck.
Yeah.
It was bad.
Yeah, I mean, it is like we were kind of saying, it's amazing how much has changed in like the last 25 or 30 years, but we're still so much in the beginning of it, right? I mean, like we
We
feel like,
are.
oh yeah, we're always going to have an iPhone or whatever, right? Well, No, I mean, before the
No.
iPhone, there was other stuff.
There was landlines. Oh my god, there was payphones. You know, it's crazy like looking back in the past, and it's like I'm 26 years old, right? And I remember when we had to use payphones to call outside of this country. And today you just go on WhatsApp and you can call somebody that's 10,000 miles away. I It's weird to be somebody in their 20s and I can actually relate to like, "Oh wow. That's a crazy shift in such a short period of time to go where you have to like physically buy a card and like have reserved minutes to, oh, I can just instantaneously open something up and then I can call whoever I want wherever they are."
Yeah, and it's gotten easy enough that, a 70-year-old can do it. Like, you don't it's not all it's accessible.
It's accessible to anyone.
Yeah, because there was a time when you had to be pretty geeky to do a lot of that stuff, right? You had to go find your geek friend to set it up for you, but now it's pretty much anybody can figure it out.
I remember when we had iPods, and back then like you kind of had to be a little techie to understand how these things worked, because you had to know like how to plug it into your computer and then download iTunes, which was not as easy as Apple made it out to be back in those days.
Right.
Like you sometimes have to get the disc. I remember this. You have to get the disc and put it in, and sometimes the disc would get dirty, and you have to clean it, put it back in
Yeah.
there, and it wouldn't load. Then finally, it would finally download. Then you have to figure out how to like buy the songs and then put them on your. It was a process, okay? Like you needed that geek friend to like show you exactly how to do this. You open Spotify, done. You could
Right.
put on any song you want, instant. And again, that's like 15 years. And what's even bananas is before the iPods, we had CD players. Before CD players, we had tape recorders. Before tape recorders, we had record players and 8-track. This is such a short period of time. Like we don't understand that progress is very slow, extremely slow. Like to the point that from the year 10,000 to 1800s, same bullshit. Same crap, same plague, people living in their feces. But we're living in an era where every decade this just keeps on building and building and building and getting more and more and more advanced as we go.
Yeah, and changing. Right, I mean, and look, they're making generations shorter, right? I mean, it used to be, when they talk about when they start labeling generations, it's like, now it's like 8 years or something. It's getting so short. Like the difference between Gen Alpha and Gen Z is like this. The window is just getting smaller and smaller because I guess so much is changing in those spaces that the generations have just all these kind of differences about their traits and habits and so on because the world they grew up in is so different.
And by the way, to your point with generations, we've kind of entered a place, even like with Generation Z, which I kind of fall under. Once you get past the year 2001, we're completely two different people, because there are things that I grew up with, which is very much the 90s. Okay, let's be real with ourselves. Anybody that grew up in the early 2000s, it's the 90s.
Right.
Okay, so I had to go through that change that happened in like the 2010s. But a lot of the people, quote unquote, in that generation bubble, they didn't necessarily go through that. They went through the other half that I went through. So there's also that disconnect. And the other thing, by the way, we are talking about music earlier. We don't really have a genre anymore. You know how like each decade kind of had
Oh,
its
right.
thing?
Yeah.
Doesn't It's not a thing. It's not a thing anymore.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Right?
And that's probably to do with something like, the fact that just there's so much more music. It used to be you sort of had the radio, you listen to the same the top 50, the top 100, whatever, and that's all,
108.5 coming to you live. Yeah, good
so that's
times.
kind of mostly what you were exposed to. And now, yeah, like you say, you call up Spotify and the world is your oyster, right?
You can listen to artists from the 80s. This is crazy. Like, you can listen to artists from the 80s from Italy that never even came to the United States. Like,
Yeah.
do you know how wild that is? Like, try to tell that to somebody in the like early 90s. Like, hey man, you ever heard of this like local Italian band that's like in Tapoli? Who? Like where? What? We didn't have access. Nobody had access like this. You had whatever was available in your local store. Same thing, by the way, with videos and films. Okay, I remember where you wanted to watch a movie, Hollywood Videos and Blockbuster. If they didn't have it. They didn't have it. What are you
Right.
gonna do? Go buy it if they have it in the store. Like, come on, who's gonna spend like $25? It's
Yeah.
on a DVD. But it's true. Like you have access to so much more information, and you know what? I think that there are people in the higher ups that are terrified of that. And that's kind of why things are kind of shaping out to the way that they are, is because of that. They're scared. They know that they're losing control.
Right. Yeah, it's kinda back to the media thing we were talking about before that I think the media world is definitely in for a shakeup.
They're dying. I mean, I can tell you as somebody that's surrounded by teenagers, none of them listen to any form of media. They don't care. They're not interested. You
And do
know,
do you think that's a cynicism thing, or
they say the
what do you
same
think?
thing. They say the same thing. It's like it's full of lies and bullshit. Why on earth should I waste my time on this?
Hmm, okay. So that I would call that cynicism.
A little bit, yeah. But the truth is, when you have young people that go through a pandemic, in my case, I also went through the recession in New York
Right.
at a young age. You kind of say to yourself, like, stop telling me what you're gonna do. Like, I don't care anymore. Like, you've lied, you've told false stories, you've gone back on your word multiple times. Like, it's enough. You know what? Like I said, like I want to focus on what I actually can do. Like what I can do is I can help give a voice to artists of all kinds, and I can do that here. I can be the type of person around my friend group that I'm the open person that people can talk to. These are things that I can do as a person. I don't need them anymore to like make me feel better as an American. I know who I am as an American, and I'm proud of it.
Or to give you permission to do it.
I don't need permission. I got
That's
my
what I'm saying.
amendments.
Well, or you don't need to join a certain club and get a certain certification and, this kind of thing, right? Or find, like you say, find the producer that's willing to, put it out on the right channels or whatever, right?
No, and I think what the most amazing thing about this is it's coming from us and from like directly from us. The reason that you're able to engage and be able to vibe and be able to have those connections with people is because you're able to make this. You're able to be the one that works towards this instead of like having people know you can't do this. What do you mean I can't do this? I want to do this. Why are you stopping me? Why are you
Hmm.
telling me what to do? Why can't I do what I want to do?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the world we're headed in where there's so much more opportunity for that, right? There's so many more avenues
So much more.
to do the creative stuff you want to do. So, one thing we talk about on my show a lot is kind of not a lot, but it's one of the topics we kind of in my
Yeah.
sort of
I'd love to get
set
into
of
your
things.
podcast, by the way. Yeah, please.
It's we talk about sort of you've mentioned a couple times like the media not telling the truth and that kind of thing. So, what are some of the things that you think about when you think about like quality? How do you how do you rate the quality and reliability of information sources, and how do you pick and choose, and how should people do that in this environment where there's so many choices?
Um, I think it should be based off of human interaction. Like, for example, for me, my access is podcasting. So I'll bring on experts and hear their opinions. And what I try to do is I try to hear both sides. So when I'm hear both sides, I'm able to kind of have like a general understanding of the situation. Okay. Like I'll give you a great example, especially when it comes to women's mental health. Okay. I had a long time where I used to get really frustrated. And then I had a really close friend of mine that explained to me, she says, you know, this is something that's where women should have the right and privacy to their own doctors because women's health is very different than men's health. And I was like, something, you have a point. And I'm like, I was able to hear her perspective. That's where I think you can get a lot of your your media and understanding of the world is people that you can find around you that are honest, that know what they're talking about. Also, people that you're like, you know what, maybe I want to get a second opinion. Do that. Get a second opinion. Hear both sides. But to just turn on Fox News, MSNBC, or CNN, like, I don't think this is a great place to get information.
Well, and even when, like CNN, for instance, sometimes tries to do the whole "we'll show you both sides" kind of thing, and even that's usually just any. And I'm just picking on CNN. You could probably
No, I
pick
know,
any
I know.
any
It's
of the
just
others.
it's frustrating because like it's
It's all
not.
a show.
Yeah,
It's just they're not really trying to be sincere most of the time. I mean, usually it's just so much show and so little, thoughtful, real diverse opinion. It's just kind of a show.
it's more like scripted dialogue than anything
It's
else.
theater. Yeah. The
Theater
show is
work.
not the right word. It's like theater. It's sort of like, you know,
Like
yeah. It's like a reality show almost.
off Broadway theater. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But yeah, and
um
and so yeah, that's interesting. So I do like that. Yeah, I mean that's a good approach for sure. I do like it. Yeah, that's what I hope. It's hard to do. You don't. No, none of us really want to hear these views that are different than ours, right? Because it can make you really uncomfortable. It can put you in a it can kind of get you riled up, put
it
you in a
can. It
freaked out
does.
state.
100%, yes. It,
But one thing you mentioned is the people that you sort of doing it with people you trust, right? That's what is a big factor in it.
yeah, and the thing about it is that people that you trust don't have to have the same aligning opinions as you. Cuz the thing that you realize, like, if you end a friendship because of politics, let me tell you something. If you're like, for example, in my case, where I have two best friends that they live in Brooklyn, and they're liberals, but we're good friends. Like, they're both very artsy. We kind of connect really well. Like, if there's a life and death situation, like, I'm not gonna like not save their lives. Oh, because you're liberal. No, I'm not gonna. The
Right.
fuck? Like, nah. That's what I'm trying to get at. Is too. It's like, if you constantly feed your mind with what that analogy of like, oh, there's this two side, that is what your brain is going to constantly think. But if you get yourself out of that analogy and you kind of surround yourself with people of different opinions, like we said, the people that you're actually able to trust, like you have that connection with them, you start to be able to have a more bird's eye view of things, which I personally think is like the most healthy way of looking at things, honestly. Because birds, God bless you, just stay in the sky. Don't shit on my car, please, but just stay in the sky.
Yeah. Yeah, that broader perspective is always good. Yeah, because we can easily get caught up in our own little worlds and lose, forest for the trees kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think honestly that is kind of the direction of your podcast, because I honestly, like, I'm just going through this, and like, you have episode after episode which kind of dives into those different avenues, and get a different perspective on different things. And I think that's so important, because if you're too afraid about talking about things or opening up about different ideas, like,
Yeah, it's funny. Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny because sometimes somebody listens to one episode and maybe, I mean, and generally, I'm more meta. I'm not necessarily talking about specific issues, but sometimes things come up and a guest says a certain thing, and it might come across as leaning left or leaning right or whatever, right? Or it might sound that way, and so I'll have somebody that hasn't listened to the show, overall. They've heard one episode, and they'll just attack me saying, all this, why are you spewing all this left wing nonsense? Or why are you spewing all this right wing nonsense? It's like, well, why don't you talk about this, and then I'm like, well, okay, if you go back to episode this, we talked about that, and we go back to episode this. So it's like, they just assume because you had one episode with one person that came across as leaning one way or the other, that means the whole show is that way. Like every episode must be that way. Like you can imagine a show that might have, some kind of diverse views on it, right? It's like it's really funny. I see that all the time. That people just assume I'm some kind of a left wing crazy or a right wing nut, right? And it's even like the most mildest stuff will set people off. To like even if you dare say something like, we should have a dialogue and we should have, we should be open to hearing other people's opinions. Even that will set people off. That alone will set people off.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And
That's
it's
crazy.
and again, like, when I say the word libertarian, a lot of people are like, oh, you're liberal. Oh, you're a MAGA, like you're like far right conservative, bro. Like there are apolitical people that call us a libertarian. Libertarian literally means is that I am a liberty-tarian. I stand by liberty, which literally is like the both of the things that we're kind of talking about. It's like we're not just focusing on right and left wing ideology. We're focusing on ideology and things that actually affect us in the real world, like real stuff, real problems. You know, I guess
Yeah, and you talked about
I
Oh,
kind of
sorry, go ahead.
understand. No, I'm kind of understand now why your podcast is called Outrage Overload.
Right, yeah. You kinda you mentioned about how, people disconnecting or, breaking friendships over politics. That was actually one of the drivers for starting the show because, like, you saw that going on, like, you kind of the 2016 elections, people got really riled up about that, and then you kinda saw, the pandemic and lockdowns and
Yeah,
people fighting over that. So you saw these waves of this going on, like people breaking lifelong friendships, good friends, family members. Everybody seems to have a story about, Uncle John is not allowed to Thanksgiving anymore and this kind of stuff, right? I mean, it's
because
just like
he's too
everybody has
racist.
stories like that. And
Yeah,
it's just like, well, that's kind of was a driver for the show of like, okay, what's going on here? I think that we can do better.
we really can. And you know what? Like, it may be just your voice, but I'm sure this will echo for a long time. If there are people such as ourselves that are doing this, other people will follow too. And again, we are entering the beginning stages of podcasting. We really are. Like, I don't want to be like one of those like put us on a pedestal, but we are pioneers. And I think that comes from this idea of like we need to do something. And this is the way that we do it. We talk about it, even if it's uncomfortable, especially when it's
Right.
uncomfortable. Ah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a moderator. I'm also a trained moderator with a group called Crossing Party Lines, where we host these kind of conversations right there. And as a moderator, my job really is just kind of keep it I don't know, within the guardrails of like politeness and that kind of thing, right? But also the other piece of my moderating job is to make sure everybody gets a chance to give their views, right? So I kind of have to run clocks a little bit so people don't ramble on too long, and everybody gets a chance to say something because that's the whole point of it is hearing individuals express their views. Like you don't have to agree with them. No one's saying you have to agree with them, but you can hear different real people, different, and I've seen that as having real impact on people, right? Like you can hear. It doesn't always happen. Like every meeting doesn't go that way, but almost every meeting has a few moments where people really said, "Well, I've never heard it put that way," kind of thing, right?
Yeah. And you know what? I've kind of realized that sometimes people don't even realize to think that way. Can I give you a quick example?
Yeah.
I had yesterday. I was talking with the couple I was telling you about from Brooklyn, and I was watching this video. I think it was like one of those shows called Chosen on YouTube, where they have a panel of like on one side is like conservatives and the other side is like liberals, and then they like ask a question and then they kind of come together and then they both talk out their side back and forth. So the question that they had that came up is, do you think in same sex couples there is a mother and father like 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 type within the relationship? So the liberal was going on and explaining that this is a great example of fluidity within biological genders, that there is a gender spectrum because kids don't view parents based off gender. They base off of them of that a father can be a mother, and a father, and vice versa. So this conservative guy, which was more left winging than he was conservative, he was actually married to a man and actually had a kid. And he says, to be fair, like my son sees us as father and father. And he was kind of said that like it doesn't necessarily matter whether there's a mother and father relationship. All that matters is that the kid has decent parents raising the kid with, the right values, giving them a great head start in life. You're mixing things in to things where they don't belong. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
they both of them, like we were like thinking about it, and she was like, yeah, you're totally right. And these are things that if we think about it, we kind of all agree with them, even though we think differently. We're like, yeah, we kind of agree on this.
Well, another thing about it, even if you don't arrive at an agreement, like I said before, you can at least understand how someone sees it the way they do, and also that they're like not, trying to, they're not trying to destroy the world. They're just like trying to get along, like just like all of us are, right?
Yeah, plain and simple. Um, you, if I'm not mistaken, have more than one show. You were telling me this earlier on the pre-call. You do a segment with your wife, right? It's on.
Yeah.
It's on. Is it on Substack?
I'm starting to do it. We do it live on. We do it live on an online radio channel, and then
Okay.
I've sort of been playing around with other simul streams of it, and right now I'm playing around with streaming it to Substack because I do have a reasonable following, and it seems like Substack is kind of where my peeps are, So it seems like, but it's a pretty all of the streaming and stuff is pretty new on Substack, so it's really. But I'm giving it a try, but it's also streamed on a radio channel, and then we put it out as a podcast, like on the Spotify and Apple and all that stuff on the next day. But if you want to listen live, you can do it on the live channel or on Substack. Um, yeah, and so it's so funny because the two shows are the extreme opposite, right? So the Outrage Overload show, which is kind of my main show, that's like scripted or it's a formal show. It's interviews with experts, and it's well edited and this kind of stuff, and and it's trying to be pretty serious. Um, and then the other show is like the exact opposite. Like we do minimal research. We kind of just sit down and turn the mics on. What we do is it's called Out This Week in Outrage, and what we do is kind of just talk about what was in the news, memes, what was in the news, and what are kind of people getting riled up about, and then to some extent the main sort of hook of the show, or the game of the show, is I try to see if I get my wife riled up about something.
You know what though? Honestly, like those are the relationships that are worth keeping.
Right.
People forget that it's not just having a partner. It's about having somebody that you vibe with and connect with. Like somebody that like honestly can do a podcast with you. Not somebody to be like, oh, you're doing that stupid thing again.
Right. Yeah. Which
Spend
is
any time
which
with
is pretty
me.
much the life of a podcaster, is people
Yeah.
saying that to you, right?
Yeah, literally every day. But I think that's so awesome
Yeah.
that you've been able to do this. Oh my! And by the way, to anybody, when you check out the website, the cover for that podcast is actually really cool. Did you have somebody make that, or you made that yourself?
I made that. Yeah. I
You
made that. I just
did?
wanted like a stylized version of us, hanging out together.
Oh my god, that is amazing.
Because we also,
Ah,
another little gimmick on the show is we usually start the show off with a cocktail or beer or something, right?
okay.
So we
Gotta
you
get
got
a
to
little,
break the
gotta get a
rules, right?
loosey. Yeah, you gotta get a loosey goosey.
Well, so many people say don't, drink alcohol to do a show. It's like, you know what? We're going to break that rule.
I mean, I smoke weed on this podcast, and I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you
we have
got
fun. Well, and that was my wife gets producer credit for that one, because that was like her whole deal. It's like you talked about the whole vibe thing. It was just like, look, we never get a chance to talk about stuff. Like we're always running around doing things. So this will force us to sit down and talk for a while.
It kind of does. It kind of does. I think that's amazing. I mean, it's kind of amazing you've been able to like handle back and forth with a lot of these shows. It's hard enough to make one podcast. It's hard enough to do two. I've been there, done that. We're no longer friends, but um, it's just I think it's incredible. Like honestly, like you need a lot of discipline to be able to do that. You need to be able to structure your time really, really well. And man, oh man, I don't think a lot of I don't think a lot of people can do it. I really don't. I think you need like somebody like you to be able to do this, which is amazing.
Well, and I was probably like a lot of people that go and try this, is like I was like everybody else thinking, oh, I listen to the radio. That doesn't sound that hard. I'll just do that. It should be easy, And then you actually find out how
No,
much is involved in it.
no, it's crazy.
you know, just the basics of like mic technique and trying to keep the thing together and all that kind of stuff, right? It's way
Mm-hmm.
more than you think it is. Like
Oh
I'm
yeah.
really bad at reading scripts, so I do weird stuff. Like I stand up when I'm reading a script, because I'll do like a little scripted segment at the beginning of my show to kind of intro the guest and kind of intro the topic, right? And I'm not very good at that, right? And people can kind of tell the difference of when I'm just being me chatting and when I'm reading stuff. So like I've tried all kinds of things. Like I've tried to put the picture of somebody that I'm talking to up and this kind of thing. But one thing that helps a little bit is I now do them standing up. So I'm just kind of an animated talker anyway. So I think that helps a little bit. But you try all these kind of weird things to kind of overcome some of your limitations.
It's weird because sometimes for me, the podcasting kind of feeds into the real world. Like for example, I go on dates with people and they're like, and they know I do podcasting. They're like, "Damn, I can kind of tell. Can tell you kind of tell why you're a podcaster."
Oh, really?
Because I got to do podcast interviews on dates. I don't even realize it anymore.
That's funny.
It is. Um, David, quick question for all these wonderful people. Where can they find you? Your social media, like I know you got a lot of places people can find you. What are the
Yeah,
best
I mean, the
places?
best place to get it all is at outrageoverload.net. So it's not .com, it's .net. So Outrage Overload. Sometimes people think I'm saying Outrage Overlord, but it's not that. It's just Outrage Overload. It's kind of like an overloaded truck, right? We're overloaded with outrage. So outrageoverload.net. And then there's a contact page. It has all the stuff. But if if you just want to be on socials and reach me, you can usually find me pretty much everywhere at Outrage Overload.
That is awesome. Well, listen, man, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on. And man, oh man, we need more freaking podcasters like you. Like I kid you not, and I see why now. It's so important to be able to do this. Not only not it's not for people. It's honestly for yourself. Like you're able to do something you're really good at. You're able to create an outlet for you and your wife. I mean, come on.
Right?
It's amazing.
Yeah, Brett, thank you so much.
Ah,
Yeah, and,
my
and by the
pleasure.
way, speaking on the contact stuff, I think Dave, that it's like we love to hear from people. Like people like they're too shy to send me stuff. Don't be shy. Send me any dumb thing you want. I will 100% respond to you.
Send it over. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on. Just keep it going. Well,
Yeah.
thank you again so much for coming on. For anybody out there, if you want to check out more of the podcast, you can find us everywhere and anywhere at Lost in the Groove Pod. And I am trying to put back our Substack, so I will leave a link for you guys to find that. So with that, catch you in the next one. All right. Peace out.